Everything kicked off with Haru and his squad of losers wandering through some sketchy, overgrown woods. They were currently getting bullied by a pack of goblins, which are basically the bottom-tier trash mobs of this world. Despite trying their absolute hardest, these brave warriors were barely putting a dent in them. In the middle of the chaos, one teammate tried to flex some magic, but mostly just succeeded in getting stabbed. Another buddy hopped in with a quick heal, leaving Haru shook, not just by the magic, but because these weak, dark G creatures were actually putting up a decent fight. What was supposed to be a quick warm-up turned into a desperate struggle to not end up as goblin dinner. Haru started realizing that these green guys were way more juiced up than the manual suggested. The next morning, Haru dragged himself out of bed before even the sun bothered to show up. Ranta played the role of the annoying alarm clock, while Manato announced that breakfast was actually happening. They traded a few words and headed down to join the party. The whole gang was already there waiting. Mogus, the designated chef, was way too hyped about his cooking, hoping everyone would actually survive the meal. The boys sat down and started inhaling the food immediately. Minato checked in on Haru and Ranta to see if they were still among the living. He reminded them that magic fixes holes in the body, but doesn't exactly refill the blood tank. Haru claimed he was fine, despite feeling like he was on a spinning carnival ride. The group then tried to figure out their next move. They desperately needed gear, but that's hard to do when you haven't actually killed anything yet. After yesterday's disaster with just 2 goblins, they decided to stop being heroes and just gank some loners. Minato told them to stick to the plan, since this definitely wasn't some harmless video game. Dying's a bit permanent here. That word game felt weirdly familiar to Haru, making him wonder what Minato was even talking about. Minato just shrugged it off like he didn't know why he said it either. Haru started overthinking everything at that point. He realized they all had these weird words stuck in their heads that didn't actually mean anything to them anymore. It was like having a corrupt save file in their brains that they couldn't open. None of them could remember a single thing before waking up in this fantasy nightmare. Haru flashed back to the moment he first opened his eyes in a pitch-black room. Voices were buzzing everywhere until a door opened to show they were stuck in some tower. He didn't recognize a single soul in the room. Memories of family and friends were just completely deleted. They decided to go interrogate a couple of guards. Next thing they knew, they were standing in front of a guy named Britt. Britt introduced himself as the big boss of the volunteers and told them they were in Grimgar. He pretended to be happy to see such a determined group of rookies. Renji immediately called BS on the whole situation, which really killed the vibe for the commander. Britt pulled a knife like a total psycho, but Renji just grabbed the blade with his bare hand like a boss. Instead of getting mad, Britt was actually impressed by the crazy display and decided Renji was his kind of guy. He bribed everyone with 10 silver coins to join his little volunteer soldier club. That's when Haru realized he was missing his cell phone. He sat there wondering what a phone even was, as the word felt totally empty and weird. Britt told them to go kill monsters and sell their loot. Apparently, that's how they'd afford the cool uniforms and the fancy perks of being a professional monster hunter. He also mentioned that if they didn't try hard enough, they'd just die, simple as that. By the next day, Haru was hanging out at the edge of the human territory. The place was a total death trap, full of monsters and things that hate people. The border brigade was the only thing stopping them from being eaten. The real army was way too busy protecting the actual cities to help. Renji gathered a crew and already got his official tags like the overachiever he is. Haru and the other leftovers formed their own squad with Minato in charge. After joining a guild, they were left with a pathetic 2 silver coins each. They realized they had to be cheapskates if they wanted to survive the week. They picked their jobs and Haru went with the Thieves Guild. He thought the vibe in there was super sketchy. A girl suddenly tackled him just because she was curious about the new meat. She warned him that the guild was brutal and would punish him if he sucked. Haru decided to take the challenge because he didn't have much of a choice. The girl, Barbara, promised him a cool nickname if he didn't wash out. After a week of being tortured, he passed and was dubbed Old Cat. His friends also managed to not fail their own training programs, which was a miracle. Mogus became a knight, Ranta Dark Knight, Yuma Hunter, Shijo a mage, and Minato a priest. Naturally, they immediately started fighting with each other. Ranta started talking smack about Yume's aim, and she had to admit she couldn't hit a barn door. Ranta got even saltier, saying at least the mage looked like he knew what he was doing. The three of them kept bickering, while Ranta acted like he was the king of the world. Manato had to step in and play parent, reminding them that they were wasting daylight. It was getting dark, and that's usually when things start trying to eat you. They hiked for a few more hours until they found a goblin camp. But there were way too many of them to do anything but watch from the bushes. Yume complained that even the goblins were eating better than their pathetic group. Haru was feeling pretty depressed about it too. They'd been in this world for 13 days and were basically starving to death. Money was gone, and they were desperate for any kind of win at this point. Since the day was a total bust, they hoped the night would be better. While everyone was sleeping, Haru heard something moving around outside. He got up to check it out because curiosity usually kills the cat, or in this case, the thief. He ran into Manato, who was stumbling back smelling like a cheap brewery. Haru didn't even know the guy drank, but Manato said he found a tavern for the volunteer soldiers. He'd been there acting like a spy to get some intel on where the easy targets were. He found a spot where they could actually kill things without dying themselves. Haru was so hyped he suggested they go hit the bar together next time. Manato asked if he could even handle his liquor, and the kid admitted he'd never even tried. They spent some time swapping war stories about their horrible guild training. Manato's mentor was apparently a total loudmouth who just yelled instead of teaching anything useful. He was just glad to be done with that whole mess. Haru looked up and noticed the moon was a weird, creepy shade of red. It made him realize just how far from home he actually was. The next morning, they finally spotted a single goblin just chilling by a stream. Haru alerted the team and they set up a textbook ambush. Yume actually hit something for once, slowing the goblin down so Haru could move in. Even though he's not a frontline fighter, he jumped in to play distraction. He tried to slash the goblin's wrist, but barely gave it a paper cut. The rest of the squad closed in and let Maguzo take the lead on the beating. Ranta saw an opening and stabbed the creature like he was trying to win a prize. The goblin screamed, and Ranta started shaking as he realized he was actually killing something. The monster was terrified and clearly didn't want to become a statistic. Haru actually felt a weird bit of sympathy for the little green monster. He figured he'd be screaming too if a bunch of teenagers were stabbing him. Ranta kept at it while the goblin begged for its life in its own way. Yume pointed out that everything is scared of dying, which motivated Haru to finish this. Shijo blasted the thing with magic, creating one last opening for the old cat. Haru lunged in and made the goblin back off with a quick slash. He chucked his dagger, hitting its shoulder and sending it into a world of hurt. The goblin tried to strangle him in a final act of desperation. Haru went full instinct mode and buried his knife into the creature's neck. Ranta and Maguzo finished it off, and the fight was finally over. The group was exhausted and couldn't believe they actually pulled it off. Yume gave Haru his knife back while Manato patched up his scratches. Ranta started looting the body and found a tooth and a weird coin. He wanted to claim all the glory, but the goblin wasn't actually dead yet. The creature tried to crawl away, but Ranta chased it down and went totally mental on it. He kept stabbing it while the rest of the group watched in horror. It was obvious the goblin was just trying to escape, not start a second round. After it finally stopped moving, Ranta actually started crying like a baby. Haru just stood there in shock, staring at his blood-stained hands. They headed back to town to sell their pathetic loot. They only got 30 copper coins for the damaged silver, which was a total rip-off. But the merchant actually paid a full silver coin for the goblin tooth necklace. Apparently, it's great for making luck charms or something equally useless. The group finally had a bit of cash, but the cost of that single coin felt way too high. After the big payday, Manato suggested they actually take 5 and enjoy not dying for once. The crew was all in. The protagonist noticed Ranta was acting like someone rained on his parade, being unusually quiet. He figured it was best to let the guy sulk and went to explore the city while everyone did their own thing. Ranta eventually ditched the attitude to go find some meat to inhale. The girls went to do some window shopping. Maguzo spent his time doing laundry and polishing his blade while Manato took a nap. Later, Manato saw Shu eyeing a shiny trinket and secretly bought it for her, which turned the girl into a blushing mess. The protagonist caught up with Yume, who looked like she was deep in thought about something. She mentioned that at least she secured her first goblin trophy, which might actually come in handy later. The protagonist wondered what kind of prize you get for collecting a whole set of those things. Yume explained that if you get enough, you can summon a demon buddy to sniff out enemies like a hellish bloodhound. They both stopped to watch the sun dip below the horizon. It was a killer view, and the protagonist realized he hadn't slowed down enough to notice the scenery lately. The landscape was honestly pretty magical. That night he lay awake, overthinking the day's events. He started to ask Manato why they only cleared 18 copper coins after all that work. But halfway through the sentence, he realized he didn't actually want to hear the answer. He killed the conversation and decided that sleep was a much better option. Suddenly, Ranta showed up with a suspicious amount of energy, wanting to hit the baths. The protagonist was confused since they had literally just washed up. It clicked pretty fast that Ranta was just trying to pull a creepy neighbor move on the girls. They tried to play goalie, but Ranta bolted past them like a maniac. He didn't get very far before the girls launched him out of the room, so hard he ended up passed out in the dirt. The next morning, the protagonist got up early to avoid being the group's dead weight. He beat everyone to the kitchen for once. He found Meguzo already there, whipping up some breakfast like a professional. He asked why he was cooking when it wasn't even his turn to deal with the stove. Meguzo just gave him a peaceful, wholesome smile. He said he honestly just liked making sure everyone was fed. The schedule didn't mean much to him. He lived for the look on people's faces when they weren't eating burnt garbage for breakfast. The protagonist felt a little guilty and thanked him for his service. He admitted the whole team would probably starve or get food poisoning if Meguzo wasn't around. It was a rare moment of actual sincerity that made the kitchen feel less drafty. Since the food was ready, the protagonist went to drag the rest of the lazy bums out of bed. When they met up, the guys apologized for the bathhouse drama, except for Ranta, who tried to play it off like a total accident. It was a pretty garbage excuse. The building was practically a ruin, but that didn't stop him from wondering where he wasn't wanted. His half-baked confession about wanting to sneak a peek just made Yume want to kick him again. Hours later, while they were huddling in the rain, the protagonist noticed the vibe was still totally awkward. The guys and girls hadn't spoken since the incident, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a sword. He realized someone had to break the ice before they all lost it. He convinced Yume to come with him to go look for tracks nearby. They stumbled onto a campfire that was still warm. Looking at the prints, the protagonist realized 3 goblins had been there, which was bad news for a group this dysfunctional. Fighting them in their current state would be a total suicide mission. On the walk back, the protagonist finally sucked it up and apologized to Yume for the bathhouse thing. He knew Ranta was the one being a creep, but he felt responsible. Yume just gave him a tired nod. She said it mostly upset Shijo, but Ranta really needed to learn that no is a complete sentence. He was definitely pushing his luck. The protagonist agreed and told the group that hunting those goblins was a hard pass for today. The only smart move was to pack it up and go home. They ended up stuck at home for days without making a single cent. Between the garbage weather and the lack of monsters, life was starting to suck again. One night, the protagonist was scrubbing his clothes, trying to get the grime off his worn-out gear. He felt like a total failure, looking at how many patches were holding his pants together. He desperately needed new threads, but his bank account was currently sitting at 0. He finished up and headed out of the bathroom feeling defeated. He caught a whiff of something that smelled actually decent for a change. He realized it was probably Yume's laundry. If he was struggling this hard, he couldn't imagine how she was managing her wardrobe. It was a weird, awkward thought that he immediately tried to bury. Then Yume actually walked in and said, "Hey." He mumbled a response and practically ran away like a weirdo. He didn't want her thinking he was pulling a Ranta and lurking in the hallways. He bumped into Ranta, who was apparently planning on doing his own laundry. The protagonist blocked his path, claiming nothing would dry in this humidity anyway. He lied through his teeth, saying he totally regretted washing his own stuff. He was just trying to prevent a second bathhouse incident from happening in the hallway. Once Ranta gave up on the idea, the protagonist finally went to bed with a little less anxiety. The next morning, the squad headed out toward the ruins of Demora. It used to be a capital city, but now it's just a massive goblin frat house. The place was crawling with green pests. They stuck to the outskirts, avoiding the city center where hundreds of goblins were hanging out. They scouted the abandoned buildings until the protagonist found a goblin taking a nap. He signaled the others to move in. Minato quickly drew up a battle plan. Ranta and Haru would go for the sneak attack while Mogas played goalie, with the girls providing backup from the back. They actually stuck to the script. They hit the creature so hard it didn't even have time to wake up. Its head was basically deleted before it could scream. The protagonist was shocked that a plan actually worked for once. He looted the body and found 4 silver coins, which felt like winning the lottery. It was the best haul they had ever managed to scrounge up. Manato, being the buzzkill he is, told them not to get cocky. Sure, it was easy this time, but luck usually runs out at the worst moments. They were still deep in a danger zone and needed to keep their heads on straight. Ranta ignored him and started his victory dance immediately. He bragged about his elite sword skills, claiming he did all the heavy lifting. Minato gave him a sure buddy and let them enjoy the moment. The mood finally didn't suck, and the protagonist felt like they might actually survive this world. They spent the next few hours bullying lone goblins for their pocket change. Whenever they saw a group larger than 5, they turned around and noped out of there. They even started mapping the place out so they wouldn't keep getting lost in the ruins. After a few more kills, their loot pile was looking pretty decent. The protagonist was mostly just hyped that he wouldn't have to wear rags anymore. They even managed to haggle a vendor into giving them a meal that didn't taste like cardboard. Later that day, the protagonist was staring at his dagger when Manato noticed the wear on it. The thing had names engraved all over the hilt. The protagonist explained he was doing his best to keep the piece of junk from falling apart. Gensou and Ranta soon showed up. They had gone out to buy some actual groceries for the team. The protagonist was worried about the food rotting, but Manato told him to chill out. He pointed out they finally had actual clothes and gear, so life was looking up. Ranta claimed he'd learned a secret move that would basically one-shot anything in his way. As they were talking, they noticed Gensou was working on a small wood carving. Ranta was shocked he had a talent that didn't involve hitting things and suggested selling it. Gensou just shrugged, saying it was just a way to not stress out. Meanwhile, Yume was trying to convince Shijo to stop being so terrified of the boys. She told her she needed to socialize more instead of living like a hermit in the group. She was genuinely worried that Shijo was becoming a total ghost in the squad. Minato eventually got mushy and admitted he was actually glad to have this group around. He confessed he'd probably be a goner if he didn't have these losers watching his back. The protagonist joked that he would have just joined a better guild and been fine. But Minato wasn't buying the joke. He admitted he was a bit of a loner and probably wouldn't have any friends if not for them. The protagonist just smiled because he knew it was their combined messiness that was keeping them alive. With all the feelings out of the way, they finally hit the hay. Before passing out, the protagonist looked at that red moon again. He realized it didn't even look weird to him anymore. He figured people can get used to just about any nightmare if they stay long enough. A few days later, Manato was out walking with Shu. They were both being socially awkward until they reached a bridge covered in pigeons. Shu was surprised to see the group leader being so gentle with the birds. He tried to get her to feed them too. She was clearly terrified of the pigeons, but decided to give it a shot anyway. When a bird got too close, she panicked, tripped, and almost ate the pavement. Minato caught her before she could turn her face into a bridge ornament. That moment finally broke the tension, and they actually started talking like normal humans. While they were bonding, the rest of the squad was back in a dungeon. They were hunting more goblins to keep the silver flowing. Ranta tried out one of his new flashy moves during the fight. But like most of his ideas, it didn't actually do much to the enemy. Everyone scrambled into their battle positions. The protagonist realized Ranta wasn't the only one getting a power-up lately. Yume had learned how to throw hands in close quarters. She landed a solid hit that gave the protagonist the perfect opening. He used his new thief skill to backstab the goblin into the afterlife. Yume looked annoyed, but Ranta claimed his dark god made him do it, which is a great excuse for everything. Suddenly, Shijo sniped a goblin with black magic, which was a pretty intense flex. Minato hopped into the fray with his staff, surprising Haru with how well a priest could swing a weapon. Minato wasn't your average healer. He was a frontline beast, which basically made him the MVP of the squad. Maguzo then flattened another goblin against some rubble using his own new power move. Ranta swooped in to take the credit for the kill, looking way too proud of himself. His demon familiar even got a buff, gaining the ability to make their enemies feel as pathetic as they looked. The protagonist watched the show and noted that the demon looked more like a glorified paperweight than a warrior, which really salted Ranta's mood. He snapped back, telling everyone to stop bullying his zodiac pet. Oddly enough, the girls thought the supposedly terrifying summon was actually kind of cute. Manato just stared at the clouds for a second, probably questioning his life choices before they kept moving. Later, the squad took a breather and started bragging about not dying today. Yum mentioned how she always bugs the god of hunters for a lucky break. The second she started getting spiritual, Ranta got triggered, calling the whole thing a load of garbage. The bickering turned into actual laughter when Manato flexed, saying they were finally strong enough to take on 3 goblins, and maybe 4 if they actually used their brains. Manato kept the hype train going by gassing up his teammates. Mogus had turned into a human brick wall that actually hit back. Ranta's lack of a survival instinct was apparently a great motivational tool. Yum brought the heat with her risky plays, and Shu was finally a magic pro, capable of freezing enemies in their tracks, a total game changer for their survival odds. During the hike, the protagonist felt a chill and looked up at the rooftops, realizing they were seconds away from becoming target practice. He tackled Manato out of the line of fire, but ended up taking an arrow to the shoulder for his trouble. The ambush sent everyone into a panic as a second arrow found its home in his leg. To make matters worse, a jumbo-sized goblin decided to join the party. Mogus stepped up to play tank against the big guy. Ranta tried to clear the trash mobs while the girls provided cover, but Manato screamed for a tactical retreat. It was a total setup, and they needed to bail immediately. The crew sprinted toward a secret tunnel they'd scouted out earlier. They dived inside just as a massive stone slammed shut, locking the green freaks on the other side. But one lucky shot from a goblin managed to clip Manato right in the head. He stumbled for a beat but told everyone to keep moving, claiming he was fine. They didn't stop. Once they cleared the ruins, the group finally stopped to breathe. That's when they saw Manato hit the dirt like a sack of bricks. As they rushed over, they realized there was a literal sword sticking out of his back. The mood died instantly. The protagonist held him steady, begging him to just cast a quick heal on himself. Manato whispered that his mana tank was completely on empty. Looking totally drained, he apologized to the protagonist and said he was passing the torch. Then he just stopped responding. Losing it, the protagonist yelled for someone to stop the bleeding. They hauled him to the Healers Guild to find Manato's old mentor. The protagonist didn't even care about looking cool. He practically bowed to the floor, pleading for a miracle. The man just shook his head, saying the light had already gone out. You can't fix dead with a simple spell or a bandage. The news hit the room like a physical punch. The protagonist went into total denial, convinced there was some kind of mistake. They made it back. Their leader couldn't just check out like this after they fought so hard. The priest dropped a heavy warning. They needed to cremate the body immediately. If they didn't burn him, the local curse would turn their friend into a mindless zombie for the lifeless king. That nightmare scenario made the group even more miserable. Shu started sobbing, while the protagonist quietly asked what the bill for the funeral would be. The priest didn't say anything at first. He was willing to pay for it himself, being the teacher and all. But the protagonist snapped and told him to keep his charity. He wouldn't have it because Manato wasn't just some employee or a boss. He was their friend, and they were going to be the ones to pay for his final goodbye. A few minutes later, the reality of the situation finally sank in. Losing the glue that held them together left everyone feeling like they were falling apart. Later that day, white smoke drifted over the city, telling everyone in Grimgar that another rookie had bitten the dust. It was a common sight, but it never felt less depressing. Even Britt felt the weight of the tragedy, looking pretty torn up about the whole thing. The squad took Manato's ashes and let them fly in the wind, hoping it would somehow make the hole in their hearts feel a little smaller. The silence he left behind was loud and incredibly painful to deal with. They buried what was left of him under the cover of night. Nobody had anything to say. They just sat there for hours while the heavy atmosphere choked them out. The protagonist couldn't stop thinking about how even dying carries a hefty price tag in this world. The whole ashes to ashes routine cost them a full silver coin. In the middle of the gloom, Ranta suddenly announced he was bailing on them. Mogus asked where he thought he was going in his state, but Ranta just shrugged like a jerk, saying there was no point in pretending this group still existed. He figured they were done for. Yume lost her cool and slapped him right across the face. She wasn't going to let him disrespect Manato's memory while standing right over his grave. Ranta looked like he wanted to argue, but the sheer misery on everyone's faces made him shut up and walk away into the dark. Later, the protagonist and Mogus tracked him down to a dive bar they used to frequent. The second they walked in, Ranta just ordered 2 more rounds. They ended up sitting down anyway, hoping the booze would wash out the taste of failure for 5 minutes. With a few drinks in him, Ranta admitted he didn't see the point in being a volunteer anymore. The whole thing felt like a scam, and Manato was the only reason they weren't already dead in a ditch. The protagonist told him they didn't exactly have a backup plan or a choice. Plus, Manato would be pissed if he found out they were quitters. That's when Ranta completely lost his mind. He shouted that if Manato hadn't wasted all his magic healing him, their leader might still be breathing. The protagonist was stunned by the sudden guilt trip. He yelled back, making it clear that playing the blame game was useless right now. They were all stuck in the same nightmare, and nobody could have seen that arrow coming. The shouting match started to annoy the other drunks in the bar. Mogus finally had enough and slammed his fist down, nearly launching the drinks off the table. He told them to shut their mouths. They were teammates, and fighting each other was just doing the goblins' work for them. He reminded Ranta that being a quitter doesn't pay for rent or food, and he couldn't just ghost his guild. They told him they were there to stage an intervention, not a bender, but Ranta joked that Manato would have been first in line for a drink. Just then, a guy they knew named Kika popped over to say hello. He acted like everything was normal. He mentioned that Manato had told him they were heading to the ruins, but he hadn't seen them around lately. The protagonist had to drop the bomb and tell him Manato died just yesterday. Kika looked genuinely crushed, admitting Manato was one of the bravest soldiers he'd ever met. He mentioned he was working with Toku's squad now and offered to give them an intro. But seeing how miserable everyone looked, he took a step back, realizing it wasn't the right time. Manato wasn't just their healer, he was the entire support system of the group. He also pointed out that monsters always go for the priests first because their magic is too annoying. That realization hit Mogus like a ton of bricks. He felt like a total failure as a tank for not protecting his leader. Kika tried to be the optimist, suggesting they just hire a new priest and keep moving. The protagonist didn't think it was going to be that easy to replace him. Who in their right mind would want to join a squad that clearly has a black cloud hanging over it? Kika insisted he knew some people, giving them a tiny bit of hope to cling to. The next day, he brought them to meet a priestess named Mary. The second they met her, the protagonist got a bad vibe from the situation. Mary was about as friendly as a block of ice. When they tried to make small talk, she just gave them the cold shoulder. They told her they were planning to head back to the ruins anyway. That night, the crew was back together. They were totally burned out, both in their heads and their hearts. They definitely weren't feeling the new girl's attitude. During the strategy meeting, she basically said she wouldn't be doing any actual fighting. Ranta immediately started a shouting match over her lazy combat style. Mary didn't even blink, giving him short, robotic answers that just fueled the fire. The protagonist tried to play mediator, but everyone was clearly at their breaking point. Mogus eventually admitted the whole thing was a disaster. Their latest hunt had been an absolute train wreck. Ranta got his leg chewed up, and Mary wouldn't even heal him, calling it a flesh wound that didn't deserve her mana. They crawled back home without a single kill to show for it. The protagonist couldn't stop comparing her to Manato in his head. Manato was the brain, the shield, and the pulse of the team. And now he felt like he was just steering a sinking ship. Just then, Renji strolled into the bar. The whole room went quiet because the guy looked like $1,000,000. His high-tier gear made him look like a god compared to them. He walked right up and said he was sorry to hear Manato bought the farm. He reached out and tried to give the protagonist a gold coin as a pity gift. But the protagonist wasn't having it and shut him down immediately. He stood his ground, handed the coin back, and told him to get lost. Renji just nodded, took the hint, and walked out without another word. Ranta started whining about the missed opportunity for a free payday. He complained that they could have finally bought those official soldier badges with that gold. But Mogus stepped in and said they didn't need blood money. Minato would have wanted them to earn their way, not take handouts from some hotshot. The protagonist realized he actually needed to go talk to the girls for once. They hadn't really processed the loss together, and he just forced a new priestess on them. He knew Minato was the one who usually kept them from feeling lonely and isolated. A bit later, he found Yume and asked if she was secretly hating him. Yume looked totally confused, not knowing where that was coming from. The protagonist admitted he messed up by hiring Mary without even checking in with them first. Yume suddenly snapped and told him to stop being so dramatic. It wasn't his fault the world was falling apart around them. She started crying but kept saying she just didn't understand how things got so messed up. He asked her to just be real with him. She confessed she had no idea how to even talk about her feelings, which was exactly how he felt too. That realization hit him like a lightning bolt. She said they were all basically socially stunted idiots just trying to be a family. She hoped she wasn't making things worse because she genuinely wanted the group to succeed. The protagonist suddenly remembered Minato's final words of trust. The memory finally broke his dam, and he started crying like he never had before. Yume pulled him into a hug, and they both just let all the built-up misery out together. Once the waterworks finally stopped, the protagonist managed to mumble an apology to Yume. He realized she and Shijo were basically living in Loneliness Central, but Yume told him to stow the guilt, admitting that his hug was the only thing keeping her sane. They both shook on a pact to actually try and play nice with Mary for a change. The next morning, Shu cracked open a window and caught them still tangled up in a hug, looking like two deer in headlights. She turned bright red and tried to slam the window shut, while the protagonist launched into a high-speed explanation that absolutely nobody believed. Shu just gave them the "I don't want to hear it" look, which naturally made the whole vibe 10 times more awkward than it already was. By the next day, Shu felt bad for the judgment and apologized, saying Yume filled her in on the details, even though she totally thought they were an item. Ranta came sniffing around like a gossip columnist, but Yume shut him down, explaining that Shu just has a very overactive imagination when it comes to hugging. Ranta just stood there looking like he was trying to solve a math problem in his head. He clearly didn't have a clue what was actually happening. The protagonist tried to smooth things over, claiming the whole thing was just one big, embarrassing mix-up. Later over breakfast, they dissected the drama for everyone to hear. Ranta sounded almost bored by the lack of juicy details, but the protagonist told him to focus on being less of a jerk to Mary instead. They admitted they'd been treating her like an uninvited guest, but she just showed up with her usual zero enthusiasm, good morning, and told them to get a move on. On the trek to the ruins, the girls tried to spark a conversation, but Mary was basically a brick wall, leaving everyone feeling like they were walking on eggshells. Once they got into battle mode, they ran into a trio of goblins. A few people got nicked, but Mary barked at them to stop whining about scratches and start focusing on the actual homicidal monsters in front of them. Ranta wasn't a fan of the attitude, but he channeled that saltiness into deleting one of the goblins. Mogus actually liked the tough love and flattened his opponent with a massive swing. Shu and Yume tried to lock down the last guy with magic, but the goblin had some moves and managed to wiggle out of their reach. The protagonist didn't hesitate, diving in and ending the green guy's career with a well-placed stab to the vitals. Ranta still wasn't happy though, and started acting like an angry drill sergeant, which made the rest of the group want to shove him in a locker. After the dust settled, Mary actually checked on Mogus, offering a quiet apology as she started patching up his war wounds. The protagonist saw her actually giving a damn for once, and felt a little spark of hope that they might finally be getting through her icy exterior. A bit later, he brought up Manato, describing him as the ultimate multitasker who balanced being a genius strategist with keeping everyone's guts on the inside. He tried to ask her how she wanted to fit into that dynamic or what her vision for the group was. Mary shut that down fast, saying she didn't have a vision and wasn't there to make friends. She basically told him if he didn't like her vibe, she'd take her talents elsewhere. The protagonist was left spinning his wheels, having no clue how to talk to someone who communicates in 1 word per hour. That night the boys hit the bar, but this time Yume and Shu tagged along, looking like they had never seen a crowded dive bar in their entire lives. Then Mary walked in, completely blanked them, and headed straight for the counter to get a drink by herself. Ranta started fuming over the blatant disrespect, but Shijo pointed out that she probably didn't know how to say hi first without dying of embarrassment. The protagonist watched some guy in heavy armor approach her, realizing the dude was a seasoned soldier by the way he carried himself. The mystery man said his piece and walked away a few minutes later. As the rest of the group headed for bed, the protagonist stayed out to have a little me time with his thoughts. He cracked open Manato's old diary and found out that his friend actually thought he had potential. The guy had basically left him the keys to the kingdom. He felt about as ready to lead as a toddler, but he knew he couldn't let Manato down. The diary entry told him it was time to stop being a follower and start showing some backbone. With that motivation, he vowed to become the leader that this group of misfits actually needed to survive. The next day, they were back on the goblin hunting grind. The protagonist noticed Mogus looked weirdly vulnerable without his helmet, like he lost his confidence along with his headgear. He tried to pull off a sneaky backstab, but the goblin was faster and gave him a fresh injury to deal with. Mogus didn't hesitate, delivering a lethal cut that ended the fight instantly. The protagonist caught Mary saying a quiet prayer for the dead, which was a huge shock since she usually acted like she had a heart made of stone. While they were walking, he pulled Mogus aside and told him he really needed to invest in a helmet. He argued it would turn him back into a beast in combat and that the team would chip in for the gear. Mogus tried to play it humble, saying he didn't need any handouts. He didn't want the group's hard-earned silver going toward his fashion choices. But the protagonist wasn't taking no for an answer, reminding him that if the tank's head gets smashed, the whole group is basically screwed, so he needed the best protection available. As she was leaving, the protagonist impulsively called out to her one last time. The girls chimed in, saying they were more than happy to help pay for his safety. The wholesome moment was cut short when Ranta shouted about a goblin prowling nearby. The thing managed to flank the girls before anyone could blink, catching the group completely off guard. Luckily, an arrow found its mark just in time to stop the initial charge. Mogus noted that she was acting way weirder than her usual brand of weird today. The creature was like a caffeinated squirrel though, and immediately circled back to go for the squishies again. The protagonist stayed in his head, trying to decode her mixed signals. Before it could do any damage, Mary stepped up and flattened it with her staff. The goblin hit the ground hard and stayed there. The protagonist was totally floored by the display of skill. He knew she had great posture, but he didn't know she was secretly a melee master in her spare time. She looked like a total pro defending Shu, showing that she was more than just a healer with a bad attitude. After they finished off the goblin, he tried to thank her, but she was already checking her watch and ready to call it a day after a long shift. She looked annoyed at being stopped, but then she caught him off guard by asking if he wanted to grab a bite with the crew. The boy was stunned by the sudden social invite. Then, in true Mary fashion, she immediately turned around and declined her own idea with an ice-cold stare. She looked like she had something on the tip of her tongue, but decided to just vanish into the distance instead. The girls agreed, saying they could feel a definite shift in the atmospheric pressure around her. He felt like she was on the verge of actually saying "see you tomorrow," which would be a huge emotional breakthrough for her. He then remembered she mentioned meeting up with that mystery guy from the tavern earlier. It almost felt like she was subtly inviting him to play bodyguard for that meeting. He turned to Shino and started digging for any dirt on Mary's past life before she joined their circus. Shino got real serious and told him that if he wanted the true, unfiltered story, he'd have to talk to Hayashi. Hayashi stepped up and began to spill the beans on Mary's origin story. He was actually in her first squad when they all arrived as fresh-faced rookies. Back then, they had a solid lineup with a knight, a thief, and a mage, which gave them a head start. They got their badges in record time because Mary was the ultimate cheerleader, always smiling and patching up every tiny scratch. She was the glue holding the team together with her strategy and healing, but then they decided to go exploration mode in a cobalt-infested mine. It was a classic leveling up gone wrong situation. They ignored the warnings and pushed to the 5th floor, where they met a giant cobalt monster known as the Death-Spotted Beast. Hayashi's memory of the actual fight was a total blur of pain. The last thing he saw was the monster's fist before he woke up to a nightmare of dead teammates and a dying tank. He begged Mary to do her thing and heal them, but she just collapsed in tears, saying she was out of juice and had to watch them fade away. That was the day the smiling Mary died and the Ice Queen took her place. She couldn't handle the crushing weight of being the healer who couldn't save her own family when it mattered most. The protagonist was in total shock at the revelation. He had no idea she was carrying an entire graveyard's worth of trauma on her shoulders. Hayashi explained that after that massacre, Mary was basically a shell of a person. She tried to keep going, but her spirit was clearly in pieces. She eventually ghosted her old group because the reminders were just too painful. It was her dark secret that she kept locked away from everyone in the guild. Hayashi could see she wasn't the same girl anymore. She was just going through the motions, and he wasn't sure if the real Mary would ever come back from that mine. Shino added that he'd lost people too, so he knew exactly how much that kind of baggage weighs. He warned them that the pain of loss is the only thing that actually keeps a squad tight and focused. On the way home, Ranta shared his usual unfiltered take, saying trauma shouldn't be an excuse for her being a killjoy. He figured everyone in Grimgar has some kind of sob story to tell. But Shijo shut him down, arguing that a total squad wipe is in a completely different league than their typical bad days. She insisted that Mary deserved a little more compassion than Ranta was willing to give. The protagonist sided with Shijo on this one. He understood Ranta's point, but he couldn't just ignore the fact that she was suffering in silence. The next day they were back in the rainy ruins, which made everything look grey and miserable. He spotted a goblin carrying a very familiar-looking dagger, the one Manato lost before he died. He wanted to rush in and take it back, but Yume put a hand on his shoulder and told him to cool it. They decided to play it safe and wait for a better opening instead of charging in like idiots. He thanked Yume for being the voice of reason when he was about to lose his cool. The rest of the group reported back, saying the area was a total ghost town. Ranta suggested they ditch the rain and head home, and the protagonist didn't need to be told twice. Before Mary could vanish, he caught up with her to try and have an actual conversation. She looked surprised that he was still trying, but she gave him a few seconds of her time. He felt like he was making progress, but he knew she was still a giant mystery box. He realized he was putting way too much thought into her mental state. But then again, the whole squad was acting like a bunch of weirdos after hearing her story. They were all treating her like she was made of glass and might shatter at any moment. She probably wondered if they were planning on firing her for having too much baggage. He decided to just be honest and told her all about Manato, the guy who used to lead them. He explained that Manato wasn't just some healer, he was the guy who literally did everything for them. The guy died being a hero and protecting his friends, which left them all feeling like hot garbage. He told her they learned the hard way that you can't save everyone, no matter how hard you try. Let's face it, Manato was the only reason this group of rejects even stuck together in the first place. But somehow, they turned into an actual squad that doesn't completely hate each other. Despite the constant bickering, they've reached that point where they actually have each other's backs. And since Mary's in the mix now, she's officially part of the dysfunctional family, whether she likes it or not. Even Ranta, in his own annoying way, told her she was one of them, which actually caught her off guard. They headed back to the city to split up, but the protagonist tried to peer pressure her into helping pick out Maguzo's new helmet. Mary took a pass on the shopping trip, but surprised everyone by inviting them to dinner instead, promising to see them tomorrow with a tone that wasn't totally robotic for once. The guys spent the rest of the day geeking out over armor upgrades and new gear before finally crashing for the night. Meanwhile, Mary sat in her room realizing just how quiet the walls feel when you're alone. Over the next few days, they went back to bullying goblins in the ruins, finally acting like a real team and stacking some serious cash. The protagonist watched the ice melt as everyone started bonding with Mary, and she finally stopped treating them like strangers. You could practically feel the friendship levels leveling up as their teamwork got tighter. One night, some high-end mighty soldiers started talking trash because the squad only hunts bottom-tier goblins. Ranta wanted to start a bar fight, but the protagonist pointed out that being the butt of the joke is fine as long as they're alive. He told the team to just ignore the haters and keep their eyes on the prize. The daily grind continued until the group reached a major milestone. Mary actually agreed to grab a drink with them at the tavern. Hayashi looked like a proud dad seeing her finally socialize with normal people. But the protagonist couldn't help but notice he still hadn't seen her give a genuine, non-depressing smile. They stayed on the grind though, dumping all their hardened silver into better armor and leveling up their skill trees. The protagonist picked up a new offensive move and learned how to walk without sounding like a stampede of elephants. Shu started messing around with a sleep spell to give the enemies a forced nap. Ranta got a get-out-of-jail-free escape move, while Meguzo learned how to literally shout people into a coma. Yume was busy turning her bow into a laser pointer with her improved accuracy. Mary didn't really need to study since she was already basically a high-level raid boss compared to them. Then things got a little trippy for the protagonist during a blue moon. He suddenly saw a glowing thread of light guiding his hand. He followed the vibe with his dagger and landed a perfect hit on his target without even trying. He stood there wondering if he was losing it or if he just unlocked a cheat code he needed to ask his teacher about. When the squad was ready to bounce, that weird psychic vision hit him one more time. Ghost Manato popped up to ask if he was tripping, but he just felt a weird sense of calm for once. He realized that despite their messy pasts, they were all in this Grimgar nightmare together as friends. Staring at the moon, he wished his old leader could see that the squad wasn't a total dumpster fire anymore. The next morning at the ruins, the crew decided to teach Mary their pre-game battle ritual. Ranta nominated the protagonist to give the pep talk, so he started with the classic, "Did everyone actually sleep?" The boys lied and said they were great, but Mary admitted she had a pretty rough night of tossing and turning. The protagonist confessed he was in the same boat, mostly because he couldn't stop thinking about getting payback for Manato. He apologized for the past and told her that from here on out, they were a package deal. They weren't going to let another friend become a statistic on his watch. Mary gave her word that she was sticking with them and got her staff ready for some violence. Ranta tried to be a gossip and asked why she was being so nice to the protagonist, but he just ignored the clown. They crept up on a goblin chill spot where the green guys were just hanging out, not suspecting a thing. They got into position like actual professionals and Yume let an arrow fly. 1 goblin down, 0 to go for that guy. The protagonist jumped a guard, but the fight got messy fast until Ranta stepped in to help clean up the trash. Meguzo decided to renovate the place by smashing through a door and waking up the whole neighborhood. They kept pushing through the meat grinder until they walked into a room with 4 angry goblins waiting. Ranta took on 2 at once like a madman, while Yume tried to snipe the last one. The goblin actually swatted the arrow out of the air and went straight for her throat. The fight got split up, and these goblins were acting like they'd actually been practicing their parries. Shu tried to put the big one to sleep, but his buddy woke him up instantly while reinforcements flooded the room. The protagonist realized he was in over his head until Mary hopped into the fray to back him up. They teamed up to shred the enemy, but the goblin landed a lucky counter that sent the protagonist flying. Mary patched him up mid-fight while Meguzo and Shu turned a giant goblin into a floor decoration. The protagonist followed a trail of green blood to find the final goblin wheezing in a corner, half dead already. It looked like game over for the monster, but then a random arrow from the ceiling planted itself right in Mary's back. The whole group froze in terror because it was a total replay of how they lost Manato. Except this time, they weren't going to let history repeat itself if they could help it. Ranta and Meguzo finished the job on the grounded goblin, while the sniper tried to parkour his way out of there. The protagonist screamed for Mary, but she just gave him a calm look and said she'd had worse paper cuts. She told them to chill, but he was seeing red and took off after the goblin archer like a heat-seeking missile. He cornered the guy and realized he was holding the exact same dagger that belonged to Manato. This was the monster that took their leader, and it was officially time for the bill to be paid. They had a brutal scrap that ended with them dangling off the edge of a roof. The goblin got the upper hand and started trying to crush the protagonist's windpipe. Suddenly, a dagger from Yume landed nearby, and he used it to ventilate the goblin's chest once and for all. Finally, that chapter was closed, and they could all stop looking over their shoulders. A few days later, the whole crew went to pay their respects at Manato's final resting place. The protagonist couldn't stop thinking about how they barely got to know the guy before he left. He realized he'd put Manato on a pedestal and wished he'd known the real, flawed version of his friend. He figured the guy probably had some bad habits too, but those secrets went into the ground with him. They were all feeling themselves a bit because they'd actually accomplished something for once. They wiped out enough goblins to earn their official volunteer badges and some actual street cred. He flashed back to when they arrived, starving, broke, and wearing clothes that were basically cobwebs. Now they were moving up in the world, and he felt a rare moment of actual pride in his squad. The girls walked up and told him that as the new captain, he needed his own shiny recognition too. They showered him with extra medals to make it official. He was the man in charge now. He joked that Manato would have called it a waste of money, but none of them gave a damn about the bill today. They just wanted to show him some love for stepping up and not letting the team fall apart. One by one, they all filtered away from the grave to head back to reality. He whispered a final goodbye, telling Manato that the group was actually becoming something special. He walked off with Mary, feeling like the world was slightly less of a nightmare for once. On the walk back, he checked in on Mary to see if she was still feeling the arrow wound. She said her magic did the heavy lifting, though her favorite shirt was officially ruined. He joked that he wished spells worked on laundry as well as they did on internal bleeding. Mary actually laughed at that, then got serious and asked why he still looked like he lost a fight. She wondered if the revenge on the goblin archer didn't taste as sweet as he expected. He admitted he wished magic could fix a broken heart, since losing a friend is a wound that never really stops bleeding. He couldn't even imagine the triple dose of misery she went through with her old team. Mary was shocked that he'd actually figured out her tragic backstory. He immediately started backtracking, worried he'd overstepped and ruined the vibe. But Mary just smiled and agreed that some things are too broken for even the best healer to fix. She actually thanked him for acknowledging it, which made her feel slightly more human. He wanted to keep the heart-to-heart going, but the local bells started ringing and killed the moment. They said their goodbyes and agreed to meet up tomorrow like they always do. The next day he woke up in a panic until he realized they'd actually scheduled a day off for once. He wandered into the kitchen to find Maguzo, who told him Ranta had already ditched them at sunrise. He was surprised the guy even knew what sunrise looked like without being forced out of bed. While Maguzo started on breakfast, the protagonist realized he had no idea what to do with free time. Maguzo looked like he was ready for seconds and offered to whip up a feast for him. He asked about Ranta's whereabouts, and Maguzo said the guy went fishing, probably to annoy some local trout. The girls were still in dreamland, probably catching up on sleep after a late-night session of crying over Manato and talking about life. He asked Maguzo what his big plans for the day of relaxation were. Maguzo said he was going to spend it sharpening his gear, which made the protagonist feel like a total slacker. But the big guy just smirked and asked him what his plan was, leaving him completely speechless. He eventually wandered out for a walk and found Shu hanging out on the bridge with her bird friends. He hopped over to ask her why she was so obsessed with feeding the local pigeons. Shu said the spot just reminded her of better times when they were all together. He noted that this was where they all saw their first Grimgar sunset as a group. Shu's vibe shifted, and she whispered with a blush that she hoped they'd be hanging out like this for a long time. He was a bit shocked but told her he was thinking the exact same thing. They shared a moment of silence before he kept wandering through the streets like a tourist. He eventually stumbled onto a terrace and found Mary just sitting there chillaxing. She waved him over and offered him a seat like they were old pals. Mary mentioned this was her place, the women's dorms, making him feel like he'd accidentally broken into a no boys allowed zone. Mary waved it off, saying the terrace was basically public property anyway. She mentioned she'd been crashing there since ditching the rookie barracks and offered to put in a good word if Shu or Yum ever wanted to move in. The protagonist nodded, figuring the girls would jump at the chance for an upgrade. As Mary reminisced, he realized this place was a museum of her past memories, filled with ghosts of the friends she couldn't protect. He finally got why she was so stuck in the past and felt a genuine pull toward her. Somewhere else, Ranta was busy staring at a fishing line, waiting for a fish to be as dumb as him. He ended up getting distracted by Yum, who was scaling a massive rock like some kind of mountain goat. Meanwhile, Maguzo did the smartest thing possible and just took a nap. After their little heart-to-heart, the protagonist and Mary went for a stroll to get some air and clear the cobwebs out of their brains. The view of the ocean at night was actually pretty stunning, making the whole survival thing feel slightly more tolerable. When the group reunited, Kika showed up with some fresh rumors about the ruins getting a lot more murdery lately. Apparently, some high-level goblins were patrolling the area and putting a lot of rookies in the hospital. The protagonist didn't look surprised, admitting he'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop. He'd noticed the local green guys were acting way too tactical to be normal trash mobs. He gathered the squad to brainstorm a new plan, since the ruins were officially becoming a high-risk, low-reward zone. Just as Ranta was complaining about the lack of options, Maguzo dropped a bombshell, and suggested they just move their entire operation to a new dungeon. The suggestion actually made the group stop and think for a second. The protagonist quietly suggested the mines, even though everyone knew that place was a total horror show. He argued that with the right gear, they could walk out with some fat loot and finally learn how to fight something that isn't a goblin. Ranta, who was bored enough to try anything, was immediately sold on the idea. He was down for a change of pace, but Yume looked like she'd rather hug a cactus. She pointed out that they were finally making progress and saving cash, so why go looking for trouble? She wasn't convinced that a career change was the best move for their survival. The protagonist held his ground, insisting the mines were their only real shot at moving up in the world. Suddenly, Mary bolted upright, looking like she'd just seen a ghost or remembered she left the stove on. She mumbled a shaky apology and ran off, leaving the rest of them wondering what they said wrong. The protagonist took off after her, finding her slumped at the bottom of some stairs looking totally catatonic. Her eyes were completely empty, like she'd just checked out of reality. He tried to apologize, but she just whispered that the mines were a total no-go for her. The place was a graveyard of bad memories, since that's where her original team got deleted. The protagonist softened up, telling her he knew exactly why she was freaking out. He admitted they'd been avoiding the spot where Manato died for the exact same reason. Mary took a deep breath and said she actually needed to stop running from her trauma. Knowing she had actual friends to back her up gave her the courage she was missing. The protagonist felt a lump in his throat, hearing her finally open up like that. He wanted to give her a hug, but figured he should probably keep it professional for now. He just thanked her for trusting them and promised they'd never leave her hanging. The protagonist tracked down Barbara to learn a move that actually does some damage. The teacher just grinned and told him the only way to learn was to get hit by it repeatedly. They spent the afternoon with her using him as a human punching bag until he was ready to collapse. Barbara had zero chill, poking his sore spots while he was resting just to keep him on his toes. She decided to get nosy and asked if he was planning on dating any of the 3 girls he was traveling with. He turned 5 shades of red and immediately tried to change the subject to literally anything else. He brought up the weird glowing rays he saw during the goblin fight, but she acted like it was no big deal. She explained that some people can see the line of death and it's a sign he's finally getting good. But she warned him that unless he gets his cardio up, he'll never be able to actually use it in a real fight. He was going to need a lot more training if he wanted to be on her level. A few days later, the squad finally reached the mouth of the mines. Ranta noted that it just looked like a big, boring hole in a mountain. But the protagonist knew the history. This place used to be a human fortress until the kobolds moved in. The group took a deep breath and marched into their next big headache. The protagonist and Ranta were struggling because these dogmen are way tougher than goblins. Gensou flattened one with a heavy swing, and Yume deleted another using her fancy new tricks. The protagonist decided it was test drive time and used his new skill to finish off a monster. Ranta didn't want to be outdone and used a Dark Knight move that literally scared a kobold to death. The protagonist realized that only the most edgy Dark Knights could pull off a Fiora like that. The terrified kobold started flailing around like a panicked toddler with a sword. The mine was divided into 3 tiers: the losers, the bouncers, and the old-timers. The first floor was full of the weak ones, but their loot was basically worth pennies. Ranta was greedily stuffing his pockets with trash, which made the protagonist feel a little gross. He felt like they should show a little more respect to the place, instead of acting like grave robbers. Regardless, the squad kept descending deeper into the dark. Mary warned them that the second floor was where the kobolds actually started hitting back. She told them the big ones usually stay asleep unless the group makes too much noise. Naturally, as soon as they found a cave, they heard a bunch of howling coming from the shadows. Gensou signaled them to freeze as a pack of dog men started sniffing the air. They spotted a group of them napping, and Ranta wanted to go for the easy spawn kill. The protagonist couldn't believe how much of a heartless jerk Ranta could be. Ranta started a long-winded speech about Dark Knight philosophy, while a kobold was literally watching him talk. Seconds later, they were back in a messy scrap with a pack of them. Shu used her magic to glue them to the floor so the guys could finish the job. The protagonist locked in and saw the glowing line of light reappear. He let his body go limp and followed the thread like a puppet. The light led his blade straight to a vital spot, ending the kobold instantly. Ranta scoffed, saying these guys were just as weak as the goblins they left behind. Mary warned him that the third floor was full of armored veterans who actually know how to use a shield. The protagonist suggested they call it a day, not wanting the team to get overconfident and end up as lunch. While everyone else was snoring, the protagonist was busy fuming over Ranta's attitude. He knew they were heading toward a blow-up and wished Manato was there to fix it. He dragged Ranta outside to try and talk sense into him, though he had no clue where to start. He asked how Ranta actually felt about the squad, and the guy just said he was doing his job. He bragged that he could solo most enemies and didn't really need the rest of them. The protagonist tried to be patient, knowing Ranta was just trying to find his place in the world. He told Ranta that his lone wolf act was making it impossible for the team to trust him. Ranta got defensive, asking if he was being blamed for every little mistake the group made. The protagonist said it wasn't about blame, but about actually acting like a teammate. They were a squad and the hero complex was going to get someone stabbed in the back. Ranta just smirked, admitting he was pretty garbage at the whole power of friendship thing. He asked the protagonist to list his own flaws, but he wasn't about to give Ranta any ammunition. This annoyed Ranta, who claimed that everyone in the group was just pretending to be pals. He insisted that his only goal was to do his part and stay out of their personal drama. He didn't think he needed their approval or their fake kindness to be a good soldier. He walked off without another word, leaving the protagonist feeling like he'd just talked to a wall. This setup turns out to be a total game changer for Ranta and Maguse. While the protagonist is busy with his own target, he's floored to see Ranta basically delete a kobold's health bar with one shot. Ranta acts like it's no big deal, which honestly just makes the protagonist even saltier about his teammate's massive ego. The group finally gangs up on the last monster, but Ranta swoops in like a kill-stealing pro to finish the job before anyone else can touch it. They decide to push their luck and head down to the 4th level, where things get weird fast. The place is littered with random crops scattered all over the floor. It looks like the kobolds actually started a little hobby farm with live animals. Haru has to stop Ranta from trying to turn the livestock into kabobs, but Mary shuts them both up and orders them to move. Ranta wants to stay and clear the room, but Mary insists on moving to the next level before the monsters realize they're being raided. Then Ranta, being the human disaster he is, trips a trap and sends bells ringing through the entire dungeon floor. Mary's panic level hits a 10 as she realizes every monster in the mine is now coming for their heads. Just as things look bleak, the ground starts shaking from the weight of something massive carrying a giant, heavy weapon. Mary's breathing gets shaky as her past trauma starts catching up to her. The protagonist spots a hulking, spotted kobold through the darkness. He realizes this is the same death-spotted beast that wiped out Mary's old squad. Mary completely freezes up, her system crashing as the sight of the monster sends her into a full-blown mental breakdown. While she's paralyzed, the monsters start sniffing around the corn stalks, leaving the group with nowhere to hide. Mary starts hallucinating about the good old days when her friends were still alive and everything didn't feel like a nightmare. She remembers Michiki suggesting they explore the mine, thinking it was a great way to level up and get some easy loot. He thought being aggressive was the only way to actually survive Grimgar's brutal economy. Back then, Mary felt totally safe with such a confident leader at the helm. Suddenly, a voice breaks through the fog, snapping her back to the present. The protagonist is shaking her, looking worried as the giant monster stomps past their hiding spot. She mumbles an apology to the group as they watch the beast disappear into the shadows, completely unaware of them. Mary pulls herself together and tells everyone they need to book it toward the exit right now. They scramble down to the 5th level, where the air feels like a furnace thanks to the massive metal forges. This is where the kobolds spend their time crafting weapons to kill humans with. As they sneak through the heat, Mary mentions she knows a secret bunker where her old team used to hide. She leads them to an ancient church of Lumiaris, knowing the monsters hate the light goddess too much to ever step foot inside. It's the only safe spot in this hellhole, so the group decides to hunker down and catch their breath. They set up a defensive perimeter inside the dusty ruins. Mary takes a shaky breath and looks at the floor. She spots a familiar staff lying in the dirt. It's the same weapon she dropped on the day her world ended. Just as she's processing that, the sound of movement starts echoing from the dark corners of the church. They huddle together until Ranta chucks a glowing plant into the shadows to see what's lurking there. 3 rotting figures walk into the light, looking like they just crawled out of a grave. Mary's heart stops as she recognizes the armor. These aren't just random zombies, they're her old squad mates. They've been turned into undead slaves by the curse of the lifeless king. She tries to talk to them, her voice cracking as she stares at the faces she used to love. It feels like a lifetime since they were all laughing together. She asks if they even remember her, but they just stare back with empty, glowing eyes. The silence is broken by the undead mage launching a fireball right at their heads. Mary snaps into action, charging forward and screaming for the new team to help her end this nightmare. Haru realizes she has a special purification spell that can finally set their souls free from this rot. He understands she didn't learn that magic for monsters, she learned it specifically to bring her friends home. He barks orders for everyone to provide cover while she does the heavy lifting. Maguzo tanks the heavy hitter, while Ranta and Yume try to shut down the undead wizard's artillery. The zombie mage drops a massive wall of fire that splits the group and turns the room into an oven. The protagonist sees Ranta getting bullied by the undead thief's insane speed. He knows Ranta is in over his head, but there's no time to play hero for him right now. He watches Maguzo struggling against their old knight, who hits like a freight train even as a corpse. The raw power of these zombies makes the squad realize just how much they still suck at this job. A blast of magical fire knocks everyone back, leaving them dazed and coughing on the smoke. Mary doesn't even flinch, walking straight through the fire like she's already dead herself. Haru follows her lead, diving through the flames and ignoring the smell of singed hair. Mary starts casting her light magic, the church glowing with a blinding intensity. The wizard tries to counter, but the light is too much for the darkness to handle. As the spell hits, the mage's human face flickers through the rot for a split second, giving a silent thank you before vanishing. Seeing her friend disappear for good finally breaks Mary's composure. She whispers a final goodbye, telling him to finally enjoy some peace and quiet. She's a total wreck, but the fight isn't over yet. The protagonist gives Ranta a nod for actually coordinating with him for once, without needing a roadmap. They work together like they actually had functioning brains. Ranta just smirks, claiming it was just his natural talent and that sometimes you just have to wing it. He charges off to bail out Maguzo, while Haru wonders if the jerk actually has a point. They corner the zombie warrior, and Maguzo uses a brutal swing to take the thing's arm clean off. Mary swoops in with the final purification, bathing the monster in golden light. The warrior's spirit is finally freed from the curse and begins to fade away into the ether. Mary hugs her old friend one last time, wishing him a rest that doesn't involve being a zombie. The whole scene is a total heartbreaker. She's emotionally shattered by the time the church goes quiet. She keeps crying, thinking about the squadmates she just had to kill for the second time. She thanks the group for having her back through the worst day of her new life. The protagonist tells her she's the bravest person he knows, while Maguzo admits the zombie knight was a total beast. The big guy realizes he needs to hit the gym if he's going to survive the next floor. Yume tries to lighten the mood by saying she wants a pet wolf, which is a very Yume thing to say. Haru stays in his head, wondering how to become a leader that doesn't get his friends turned into zombies. Suddenly, the vibe in the church shifts again. Mary sees something coming out of the shadows, and her eyes go wide with terror. The protagonist barely ducks as a massive blow whistles over his head. He screams for everyone to run as more monsters flood into the church like a green tide. His voice is the only thing cutting through the chaos. Ranta plays goalie, keeping the kobolds off Shu so they can all make it into the smelting area. But the dogmen are right on their heels, barking and snapping at their ankles the whole way. The protagonist covers Yume while she tries to turn the local wolves into pincushions with her bow. They're completely outnumbered and realize they're getting boxed in by a massive horde. A kobold hits Haru so hard he crashes into a wooden scaffolding that starts groaning under the weight. Yume parkours her way up as the structure starts to tilt dangerously. Arrows are raining down as the protagonist scrambles up the falling ruins, desperately reaching for a hand. He's shocked when Ranta actually stops to pull him up, showing he might actually have a heart buried under that ego. But the kobolds aren't done playing with their food yet. A massive kobold hurls a metal disc that smashes the scaffolding into splinters. Haru tries to grab Ranta's hand, but the impact sends him sliding away as the wood gives out completely. Ranta screams for him to climb, telling his leader that he's not allowed to die in a dump like this. Haru tells him to stay alive, his voice cracking with the realization that they're getting separated. Ranta just laughs like a psychopath, saying he's too cool to get killed by a bunch of dogs. By the time the protagonist reaches the upper level, the structure is gone and Ranta is trapped down below. The rest of the group looks at him, waiting for their leader to tell them what to do. He stands up and tells them that even if it's a suicide mission, they aren't leaving their friend behind. Mary finds a back way to the 5th level, and the squad decides to go back into the fire for Ranta. Down below, Ranta is having the time of his life, challenging the entire horde by himself. He's using his speed to hop through the debris, looking way too proud of being a one-man army. The big kobold finds Ranta's busted, bloody helmet on the ground and thinks he's won. But Ranta is a cockroach and manages to crawl his way to a higher ledge while bleeding out. He hides near the animal farm, trying to keep his breathing quiet so he doesn't get sniffed out. He always thought the kobold's farm animals were gross, but they make for great cover right now. He uses the distraction to summon his demon familiar, who pops up looking bored as usual. The demon starts roasting him, saying he's finally going to die and that nobody is coming to save him. It's not exactly the motivational speech Haru was hoping for, as he tries to figure out an escape. Upstairs, Mary starts patching up the group's wounds, while insisting that their own safety has to come first. But everyone in the room knows that leaving the jerk behind isn't actually an option they can live with. Yum admits that even though Ranta is a loudmouthed idiot who annoys her constantly, they can't ghost him. She's still mad at him, but she knows that being alone in that pit is a fear she wouldn't wish on anyone. She can't even imagine how much he's panicking down there while acting like a tough guy. The protagonist stays calm, betting on the fact that Ranta is too stubborn and survival-obsessed to die easily. They all agree to dive back into the mine to pull their teammate out of the fire. Meanwhile, a kobold gets too close to the farm, and Ranta's sword comes out of nowhere to ruin its day. He hits the dirt, but the sound of the fight draws every other monster in the area straight to him. Ranta tries to bolt, limping like he's got a leg made of lead, but he finds a spot to tuck away. Meanwhile, the squad hears the sounds of a struggle and realizes it has to be him, since nobody else is that loud or that messy. The protagonist is genuinely flawed, as he'd pretty much already written Ranta's obituary in his head. In a rare moment of regret, Ranta starts reflecting on all the life choices that led him to this dumpster fire of a situation. But right on cue, a jumbo-sized kobold smashes into his hiding spot, and a destructive shockwave starts turning the surroundings into splinters. Pure panic takes the wheel, as Ranta does his best to play dodgeball with a monster while looking for an exit. Suddenly, an arrow finds its way directly into the creature's eyeball. The protagonist arrives with the rest of the gang, and they're all shocked that Ranta is still breathing after being cornered by such a massive threat. While the team handles the falling debris and rocks, Mary drops some magic to fix Ranta's busted knee, while the others form a human shield around him. Yum shouts that her quiver is officially empty, so she unleashes a magic blast that shatters the kobold's defense, giving the crew a second to find a better position. They finally realize they've actually got the momentum for once. A few minutes later, Mary finishes patching Ranta up, and the guy actually gets misty-eyed, thanking them for not leaving him for dead. But the protagonist kills the vibe by reminding them that they shouldn't get cocky yet. The walk home is long, and the forest is still full of things that want to eat them. As they trek toward the exit, the protagonist starts overthinking what it actually means to be a leader. He spent all this time trying to be a Manato clone, but he finally realizes that's a total lost cause. Nobody can just replace the guy. He needs to figure out how to be the best version of himself, and from that point, focus on steering this group in his own weird way, without worrying about living in Manato's shadow. When they hit the first floor, Mary gives them the heads up that her mana is tapped out. She's got one heal left in the tank, and then she's going into power save mode. The protagonist gets it, especially since Shijo looks like a zombie from exhaustion. They keep pushing, but as they're shuffling across a narrow ledge, a giant sword comes out of nowhere and slams into the cliffside. It clips the edge. Terror sets in instantly, and Shijo burns her last scrap of magic on an attack. But it does absolutely nothing. The protagonist knows that a fight here is basically a suicide pact, and they can't outrun anything in this narrow hallway. Somebody has to play the distraction and buy some time. With zero plan, the protagonist just lets instinct take over the wheel. He uses his scarf to try and lasso the kobold's neck like a total madman. He screams for the group to run, while he prepares to pull a sacrificial play to hold the monster back. He tells Ranta that he better not let this sacrifice go to waste. What follows is some straight-up movie drama. The protagonist feels his legs turning to jelly, but right before he falls into the abyss with the monster, he hears Ranta yelling at him to never quit. That slap of motivation brings back the willpower he thought was long gone. Even with a fractured wrist and holes in his body, he refuses to just roll over and die. With a second wind, he notices that the monster, despite looking like a nightmare, is actually moving like it's underwater. He lunges with surgical precision, dancing with his dagger, and jams it right into the kobold's eye to blind the thing. He follows a glowing path, hitting every single weak point on the creature until it's forced to back off. The squad is stunned by the display of skill, but before anyone can ask if he's hacking, Ranta tosses a sack of gold coins at him, claiming the jackpot is his since he took the monster down solo. A cool 30 gold coins. While he's standing there confused, Yum explains that they actually doubled back to save him and found him passed out next to the monster's corpse. They decided to loot the reward and hand it over to him, since he was the one who actually did the heavy lifting. Even Maguzo, who managed to lose his entire sword, brought back the broken handle as a souvenir, showing just how much respect he's got for the protagonist's guts.